Hi, it's me again. I'm finally back this week, guys. I know I've been gone for like 6, 7 weeks now. I was overseas doing lots of other crazy things, hanging out in the UK and Ireland. And I've actually been putting off this podcast for a few weeks. Haven't been able to connect because we're both super busy people. But I have Ismail Youssef on the podcast today. He's one of my favorite guys on the internet. He's a fellow Catholic, former Muslim, which I think is really, really fascinating. And it's such an incredible story. If you haven't checked out any of his other podcasts all over the internet, please go sure to check that out. So I'm honored, Ismail, that you came on my podcast because I'm just a nobody in Colorado. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, and you're doing good stuff. You're not just a no one. You're actually trying to do stuff and change the world. So even if it's one small thing at a time, it works.
Well, that's all that we can do is we can spread the word of the gospel and we can try to convince people that they're doing things the wrong way and they can follow the right path, so to speak. But your story is absolutely fascinating. So let's just, for people who don't know you, start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? How did you end up where you are now? Let's just get that all the way before we dive into the really really fun questions.
Okay, so I was actually born in Canada. So I'm from Halifax, Canada, in Nova Scotia, and my mom is Canadian, like completely white Canadian, and my dad is from Egypt, and he immigrated to Canada like probably in the 70s or 80s, something like that. And he was actually a very good person. He immigrated, he came in legally into Canada, he integrated into society, and then he fell in love with my mom and they got married and they had my brother and then he had me. But something happened in my dad's life where he got very super religious and Islamic, and he took my brother and I back to Egypt to learn about Arabic and the Quran and how to have a Muslim life. And that was very traumatic for my mom, to say the least, because my mom's from like a small town, Nova Scotia. Like the only people she grew up with who were like immigrants were like one Indian family down the street who owned like a co-op store, like a convenience store. Like it was just nothing. But before she knew it, she was in the middle of the Middle East, um, raising two kids, teaching them Arabic, a language she didn't even know that she had to learn by herself and then teach it to us with my dad. And we were raised basically between these two worlds. So every summer we'd go back to Canada and we'd visit like the United States. We do a lot of trips to Boston and New York. We would go to Europe. We would see many different areas, and we're very blessed to do that. But eventually, there was a lot of like a culture clash that I witnessed, even from a young age. And I became quite devout in my Muslim religion. However, the older I got, the more radical I got. I started seeing events happening around me, like ISIS became a thing. Um, a major thing that occurred was the Charlie Hebdo attacks in France, where people drew pictures of the Prophet, and these ISIS members basically murdered them just for drawing a picture. And this was when my faith started to crumble because I realized that my morality was better than the morality of the people who followed Islam, like to the letter. And also, the more I read about the life of Prophet Muhammad, if you want to even call him a prophet, and more of what he did in his life, I realized at the age of 16 that I was more moral than this individual. So, long story short, I left Islam, and this happened when we were back in Canada. So I went to high school in Canada, and I basically decided to live a very nihilistic life and not really think about any religion. And I tried different philosophies. I tried to live a life full of like nihilistic hedonism. Sometimes I had a week of communism, which didn't last very long because I never actually mentioned that, but I had a week of communism, and after reading some of like Karl Marx's works, I was like, this is not going to work out. So I kind
Yeah,
of put that
just a
aside.
light week of Karl Marx, no big deal.
Yeah, and I was like, this is not good for society. So I would try different philosophies on every couple of weeks, and I was left with nothing. And I loved everything about the Western world. I loved how these two great countries, because the United States and Canada, they were basically my home. Even though I was Canadian, I visited the United States all the time, and I had a lot of American friends.
Right.
And these two great countries were like, I don't know, they came out of nothing. They're 250 years old. Canada's only 170 years old. It's they're very young, but they did amazing things in such a small period of time in history. And I thought to myself, where did this come from? How did we get to this basically huge continent that didn't have a country or a nation built to it? And now we have two of the greatest countries in the world built on it. And I thought about it, and it was the more I read about Western values in society, basically the right of freedom of speech, the right of freedom of expression, the right to defend yourself, and all these things started to make a lot of sense to me because they were lacking in the Muslim world. You
Mm,
couldn't freely criticize the caliphate. You couldn't freely criticize Sharia law. You couldn't really defend yourself unless you were basically employed by the caliphate and people respected you. All these things were taken away from you. And then the freedom of religion, you can leave religion or join a new religion whenever you desired. That was missing for me. And I realized around the age of 18, I had a huge spiritual experience with uh, a Christian missionary group, and it wasn't just the feeling of encountering God and giving my life to Jesus and understanding who Jesus was, but it was also understanding that Jesus he built a church and that he basically made the foundation for Western society. And the Catholic Church was the foundation for Western society. And when I noticed this and put my faith in that institution, even though the people, for lack of a better phrase, they can suck completely in that institution. When I put my faith in that and what Christ said about the institution, who he is and how he would guard it, I realized all the good values that came from the West came from Christian values, came from the understanding of Christian tradition and scripture and the church fathers, and wrestling with different philosophies, but from a Christian perspective. So I gave my life to Christ and when I was around 18 years old, and now I'm almost 26, and I just the more I go into religion, the more I see who Jesus is, the more I realize there is no other philosophy on earth that is greater than the Christian philosophy for humanity. And really, it's not a philosophy; it's an encounter with the risen Lord, and it's
I
important.
like that. I like that you said it's an encounter. I think that's a really important point that a lot of, Catholics really miss out on. So,
Exactly. You can't just say it's like a bunch of ideas. It is a bunch of ideas, but ideas all come from one encounter. You encounter Christ, and then he changes your life. And while he changes your life, you change your society's life, your community, then the city, then the state, then the country. And it expands altogether. Like look at the Roman Empire. When Christ rose from the dead, it started with just a handful of apostles, and then with by 300s, they had to legalize Christianity because half the empire was Christian, and it was because of one-on-one conversions. And I think that's what people have to get back to, is getting back to those sharing the truth with love one by one, because we can't force the truth on anyone. We can only voluntarily give it to them.
no, I 100% agree. And I think for me, like, I always grew up as a Catholic as a kid, but, when your mom's forcing you to go to like CCD, so to speak, every Sunday, and you're like
Hmm.
6 years old, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to listen about Noah's Ark anymore.
Yes.
I just want to go play my Nintendo or something, right? And then for me, like, my faith, what some people know, like, I kind of walked away. I had a lot of issues in the military when I was young, and I kind of walked away from the faith for a little bit. I thought it was fun going to the jam band churches and like, where there was like guitars and drum sets and like things were more fun. But for me, it was just like, I just want to feel good in the moment. But then after that, you forgot about it, right? And then for
Hmm.
me, when I rejoined the military after I got off active duty, like several years later, I started walking it back and relearning. But I mean, what really transitioned me back hard was when I got deployed to the Middle East, right? And when I deployed to the Middle East, I had a very, very similar experience to you where you see how these people live. And like in the United States, even all through high school and middle school, like, oh, there's like major religions. There's like Judaism and then there's Christianity and there's Islam and then there's Hinduism and Taoism or whatever you want to talk about, Confucianism, and everyone just like is happy go lucky and everyone, let's sing songs and hold hands. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good, on paper in the US, but then when you go overseas and you see people getting zip tied and thrown off of buildings,
Yeah.
it really changes your perspective. Like
Yep.
I thought that the Islamic religion was a religion of peace and that it was only a very small portion of them that believe in all these terroristic ideas, our government didn't help, right? I mean, after 9/11, we were always infused with this idea of like every Muslim is bad, which is not inherently true at face value. But then when you look at what they value deep down, like you said, the institution of Sharia law, and then and you start seeing the implementation, what's going on in Michigan right now, where you literally have people pledging allegiance to a different country outside of the U.S. who are now trying to take over government institutions. Even out here in Colorado, after the Black Hawk Down incident in the early 90s, where they killed 18 Special Operations Forces guys and Rangers and Delta guys, President Clinton actually resettled several hundred Somalians out in Greeley, Colorado, which is near to where I live. And they have been slowly changing the culture of this, American ranching, agricultural cowboy area, right? Because I want everybody to be able to legally immigrate to the United States. I think being an American is one of the greatest privileges we have. But there's a difference when you want to immigrate here legally and assimilate to American culture and hold those so-called base Christian values, at least that our government is built upon. And also
Mhm.
another thing you brought up that I thought was very interesting was, we have, separation of church and state. And it's like, well, we don't have separation of church and state, and we have freedom of religion, not freedom from religion,
Yes.
right? We have freedom of religion. You can practice whatever you want, and that's awesome. But we don't have freedom from religion, right? The Danbury Baptist letter that was written by Thomas Jefferson mentioned separation of church and state, and nowhere is that mentioned in our Constitution or Declaration of Independence, because those 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence and the constructors of the Constitution, even though some of them didn't all agree, they all agreed that these Christian-based values, and most of it was Protestants back in the day, believed in the framework in everything that built it. And even the original 13 colonies, most of them required you to sign a pledge that you were at least Christian in order to even serve in
Mhm.
office, because it is important to have leaders. And actually, it was kind of funny. I was listening to Father Mike Schmitz the other day when I was in DC, and one of the things that came up was your obligation as a Catholic to serve in public life. And that was one of the most fascinating conversations, is because if you are a Catholic and you see all these things eroding your community, even if they're not Catholics themselves, it is our public duty to make sure that those morals and ethics are instituted in our local government, and in our communities, right? And you kind of brought that up beforehand, talking about the morality of how everything is formed under these things. And it is our obligation not only just to spread the word of the gospel, in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, which we invite everybody to, no matter where you come from, but you're going to be hated for doing these
Mhm.
things. He even proclaims that, right? You will be hated, you will be killed, you will be fought, right? This is not an easy path, bearing your own cross, and that path can sometimes be alone. But most of the apostles were killed, for spreading the word of Christ, for the years after Jesus was crucified. And I think that's everyone wants to talk about the hugs and the free cookies and the coffee parties after mass, right? But they don't want to talk about the hard work that's actually involved. And you've seen that personally with your, not only your proclaiming of the gospel and being on so many podcasts and stuff, but you've seen that in real time, around your travels throughout the United States and the world.
Yes. And I think something that was really shocking, actually, I was just in San Diego recently, and I was as shocked by the amount of Muslim immigrants who are in San Diego.
Hmm.
Because my first thought was like, how did they get here? Like it's literally the opposite side of the world. Like maybe New York, like Atlanta, Florida, even, but San Diego, it was insane. They were everywhere, and to the extent that like even like where I'm from, like Quebec just banned Muslim prayers in the middle of the roads. You cannot pray a Muslim prayer in the roads now in Canada. in Quebec,
I mean,
and
unless
the
you don't
rest
want to
of
get
the
hit by a
provinces.
truck, that makes sense just from a base safety level.
Yeah, they basically worded it as like all religions because they can't specifically say Muslims can't pray, but it was
Right.
targeted for the Muslims because what they will do is literally go out in the middle of the streets and start praying and
Mhm.
blocking the roads. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, they are the only group. Like there's some groups that have a harder time than others integrating, but you are not even trying to integrate. You're
No.
literally it's basically a conquest. That's what people do when they conquest a city.
I mean,
They
that's how
show
they
their
started,
presence.
right?
Exactly. And they're doing it in Montreal and in New York and then San Diego randomly. I never even thought it would be in San Diego. But everywhere I went, every major city above like 500,000 or a million people, Muslims are doing this. And something I realized is, well, I realized this a while ago, is you can keep people if they're in the minority. If the Muslims are in the minority, they will stay peaceful. However, when they start getting the majority, or at least a significant percentage of the the city or the state you're living in, it can get very tricky very quickly. It has nothing to do with individual Muslims, but has to do with the ideology itself. And it goes to like basically everything about the ideology is in sheer contrast to what we stand for. And that's why the two of them cannot mix. And it's hard. It's really hard to say people have the freedom to choose their religion, but at the same time, when there's one or two religions that are sticking out like a sore thumb, and you're like, please don't choose this one, but people start choosing it, or people are integrating or immigrating, I should say, from an area that has that religion, it makes it very difficult to make a case where you see like President Trump saying way back when we should ban people from Muslim countries. And it's interesting because can you really blame him?
No, and I think you bring up something that most Americans don't know is the concept of taqiyya, if I pronounce that correctly, right?
Yes. Okay, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's like in Shia Islam, it was developed historically when the Shia minorities lived under persecution, right, and allowed them to protect themselves without renouncing their faith. I mean, it's kind of similar to when the Catholics were hiding in the catacombs back in the day, right? But the
Mhm,
problem is that it gives them the not, I wouldn't say authority. Like I'm not a Muslim, so I can't give you the exact definition of it, but like the willingness to lie about your intentions of what you're trying to do within a society, right? And I think you're right, is that when they're in the minority, they're very peaceful. I grew up with Muslims in New Jersey, and it was never an issue, right? I never
mhm,
saw any violence or anything by them. But what you're seeing now across the nation is there are now imams around the United States coming out and saying this state, this city will be Muslim, right? They will
mhm,
be under Sharia law, right? Because they're gaining numbers and strength. And most Americans are like, well, they have freedom of religion; they can do whatever they want. I'm like, well, yes, and they're practicing place of worship. Like even when I was in the UK last month, you're right, groups of them were lining up in front of Westminster Abbey and praying right in front of it and blocking everybody from even accessing their own church. So now
yep,
now they're preventing people from even going and practicing their own religion, right? They're preventing people from even going because they're intimidating the local population. And slowly you're starting to see them go around these towns and intimidate Christians or Hindus or Confucianists or whatever you want to believe in. Flying spaghetti monster for all I care,
mhm,
right? But you're seeing that I think a lot of Americans take it for granted their freedom of religion, right? And it's like we have to respect and be peaceful towards everybody. Yes, correct. We don't want violence in this country, but they just constantly keep turning up the temperature, right? They're
mhm,
protesting. They're blocking streets, like you said in Canada. They are now trying to implement places of Sharia law, like you said. Well, you had this before the podcast, where in Texas they're trying to ban it because they were literally trying to build Sharia law like buildings and like police officers to go
yep,
around and their own Sharia police to go around and enforce these things. And I think one of the biggest issues, and I think you would agree with me, is that the United States is so large and it's so diffused that sometimes you don't see it in concentration, right? Like when I was in England and the UK, like these are island nations. There's only so much space. There's only so
mhm,
much housing that these people can go to. So, I mean, right as I was leaving, there was massive protests against these Muslim immigrants, illegal immigrants, right? Massive protests. They were walking around with the St. George's flag, and they were like millions of people are in the streets. And in the UK, they don't have freedom of speech. I mean, they're literally arresting people for Twitter comments, right, or X comments, right? And they just shut the cell phone towers off because there's nothing that we can do about it. In the US, like we take our freedom of speech for granted, but they are keeping this situation very quiet overseas. And I think, like I said before we got on this podcast, is that there is a significant danger right now of this type of cultural movement coming into the United States and then Americans not realizing what's going on before it's too late.
I think you're onto something where when you're talking about geography. We notice it like when you're a French person and Paris is now all Muslim. That's your major city, right? But even
Mhm.
if New York became all Muslim, you still have 20 other major cities, even
Right.
if New York's the biggest city. So you can move away and not even think about it. Or you can say, oh, it's on the East Coast where you're living on the West Coast, and not really even comprehend what's going on there. Because
Yeah.
the United States is such a huge country. But the issue is also it starts little by little. It's not just one
Mhm.
city. They're not going to stay there. They're not just going to be like, oh, we're going to have Dearborn, Michigan, and then we're not going to move any further. There's going to be 500 Dearborn, Michigans within 100 years. And people aren't ready to have that conversation, mostly because people on the left want to say, oh, well, you're racist because you just don't like them because they're brown.
Or
But then when someone like
Islamophobic, right?
Islamophobic, but then I say I say something and I'm brown, and then people are like, "Oh, well, you're just a self-hating Arab." I don't know what that means, but and whatever you
Yeah.
say, you're kind of screwed, basically. But because people don't want to admit that these ideologies cannot coexist. And I think it's time. I think Americans are waking up. I think people in the Western world are waking up. Like he said, in England, there are massive protests. In Canada, we had a Canada First protest in Toronto, which is insane to me because Canadians are usually the last people to do anything like that.
They
And
say it a
then,
lot when Canadians are protesting.
yeah, when Canadians are protesting illegal immigration, guys, it says a lot.
You should probably pay attention.
Yeah.
There's even a law in Scotland. When I was out there, I was talking to a lot of people out in Edinburgh, and Glasgow and stuff out there, and they were telling me how there's a law that if you keep your door open to your home in Scotland, that anyone can walk through it and demand residency. Right? So people are like out farming or like gardening or going to get the mail, and they'll see these African illegal immigrants like sprint over the jump the wall and get into their house just so they have to force to give them a bed. And then if you call the police out there to try to get them removed, they're like, nope. Well, according to Scottish law, you have to be able to quarter them basically and provide them food in a place level. I'm like, dude, this is why we have guns in the United States. If you tried that in
Yeah.
Texas, like it's not going to work, right? Like
You're not making it out
you're
alive.
not, no, you're not, right? So, and that's an important thing to understand is that the reason why we have the Second Amendment in the United States, it's not for hunting, it's not for hanging out, it's literally for protection from the government, right?
Hmm.
It literally was designed to do that, and a lot of these nations do not have that, and you're seeing the effects of that. Like there is more stabbing and machete deaths and blunt force trauma deaths than anything else than in the UK and Ireland, right? And nobody wants to talk about that. But like I even said, like when I was out there in Belfast, I was getting followed by some of these illegal immigrants because I was walking by myself at night trying to get back to my hotel, right? And good thing I was able to evade them a little bit. But like I can't just call the police out there; they're not going to do anything, right?
Yeah. And it says a lot about the governments too that they literally favor the illegals over the people who are the citizens. Like think about that. Imagine if you are
Yeah.
like you're a Scottish born citizen, your parents and grandparents have been there forever, and then some guy from Tunisia shows up and then just like walks into your house and takes it from you. You can't even defend yourself.
Nope.
And then your own government is against you, saying you have to have they have residency now.
Yeah,
That's
and another thing I
it's
noticed too is
backwards.
like, and I think like they don't make a lot of money in the UK and Ireland at all.
No.
Compared to the United States, they make like a third or half of what we make in the United States. And granted, most Americans are workaholics and they want to work like over 80 hours a week or whatever. But in these countries, they're limited. They can only work like 32 to 40 hours a week or whatever it is. Most of it's like government provided jobs or like the jobs are very slim to none. But unfortunately, what I was seeing over there and interviewing a lot of the service industry people, a lot of the locals, like even the Irish or the Scottish or the English, is that when these illegal immigrants come over the English Channel and they infiltrate into these cities, the government has to give them benefits. So they have to give them like work and jobs to do. So what they do is like they pull 5 to 6 hours from everybody working on shift in order to pile up enough like 32 hours minimum or whatever it is to give this illegal immigrant the government benefits. And now these people are making even less money when they barely can afford just to pay rent and buy food as it is, right? And that's
Mhm.
that's causing a lot of internal conflict with the natives of these countries. I mean, and you see it happen a little bit here, like some of the factory work or the farming work or things like that, and there's a whole process of illegal immigration in the United States where for the most part, a lot of our seasonal agricultural workers from Mexico, like they do apply for the seasonal visas and then they expire. They don't renew them fast enough. I'm not worried about those people. Those people are actually trying to work. They go back to Mexico, they come back. Sometimes they
Mhm.
overstay their visa, but at least they're applying for the visas, and we need to make sure that they have access to keep renewing those visas so that not that they have a pathway to citizenship, but at least in the future, because they've been following the rules, those processes can be expedited so they can become assimilated Americans, right? That
Yeah.
that I appreciate. But it's the people that are jumping the border illegally, that are staying here, overstaying their visas intentionally, that are actually becoming a problem on the public system. But like I said, we have 50 states. The United States is so large that sometimes we don't see it. But even the state of Colorado, we're in a $1.5 billion deficit, and a lot of that funding goes to funding for illegal migrants, right? And there's going to be a point where we can't. I mean, we can't afford it now. We just pull money out of thin air because money doesn't exist, I guess. But when you're seeing it in these smaller countries like Ireland and the UK, it is a massive problem because they don't have massive industries. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure that Nvidia stock is worth more than the entire GDP of Ireland.
Oh yeah.
Like you know what I mean? So you feel that impact way faster overseas than you do here. But at what point do we sit here and say maybe this isn't in our best interest? I mean, now we have like Representative Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. Like, you have legitimate representatives in Congress now that are putting their first alliances to their home countries in Somalia or whatever it is over the United States and over the Americans that they represent. Like, where do you see that going?
I think this might sound very dim. It's kind of too late, and we have to be ready that it's too late because Europe has already fallen. There's no saving Europe. It's done. Europe is going to be a Muslim continent within 100, 200 years. That's being generous. 200 years of being generous, because the fertility rate of Europeans,
Hmm.
they don't have children.
No, I was actually
Europeans,
to bring that up.
they literally cannot. Number one, they can't afford it. Number two, they've been lied to about contraceptions and all this stuff, that
Hmm.
they shouldn't have children by left wing liberal governments, and they have to bring in people to work because no
Yes.
one can no one can do the jobs because there's no people, there's no
Right.
children. So they bring in all these Muslim immigration because Muslims have 8 kids per family.
Yep.
And what happens is, within 50 to 100 years, the most common name in France is Muhammad.
That's
And
insane to
that's
me.
yeah. And
That's
then before
insane.
you know it, in another 100 years, there's gonna be no Pete's or Charles in England. That's it. It's gone. It's gonna be a Muslim state. And it will be run by Sharia law. And what we can do here on the other side of the ocean is look at it and prepare ourselves and be like, okay, we have to have more children. Like
Hmm.
that's something we have to do as Christians. Number one, we're called to go forth and multiply and spread our seed and have children. Number two, forget about Christianity, even from like a secular perspective, just looking out into what Europe has become. If we don't do this, we're going to lose so many people, and we'll have no choice but to bring in immigration, and it's going to be one type of immigration because it's going to be Muslims,
Yeah, and
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 then before you
that's the
know
one
it,
thing.
we're going to be like Europe.
No, and that's actually why I am not against legal Mexican immigration because at least most of them are Catholics, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
they love having
Like,
kids,
please
and
come. We don't want the
they
Muslims.
they
Please come.
also love to party, and they make really good food. I mean, I've worked in the oil field for 14 years as my main job, and I love the Mexican people. They are great.
Mhm.
And to be fair, most of them are very much against illegal immigration as well because they worked,
Yes.
they earned their right to be here, and they're bringing their culture and their food, which I'm all about, and their Catholicism, and they're all about assimilating to American culture while keeping their personal cultural values and that nuclear family concept, which I think is amazing, right? That's great.
Hmm.
But what I've seen for most Muslim immigrants and illegal immigrants is that they only desire to wipe out our culture. That's
Yeah.
it. They want to replace us. I mean, when I was even in the UK, I mean, they're buying out buildings and knocking them down and putting up mosques and everything else. And it's horrific watching them do this to such, you know, what defined Western European world architecture for years, and they're destroying it and
Yeah.
implementing what they want to, right? And then they try to use the argument of what's going on in Israel and Gaza. Well,
Mhm.
these people are being oppressed and everything else. I'm like, yes, they are. And I will say, as somebody who's literally been in that area, I don't agree with everything that's going on there. I think human suffering towards children is horrific, and we should try to stop that at all times. But these people are taught from the age of 2 to kill us.
Hmm.
They are. And nobody wants to admit that, right? Nobody has seen it with their own eyes when you're watching children walk around beheading dolls and, burning American flags. We don't do that to our children here, right? So when naive children are brought up in this culture of hate, where all they are taught is to kill the Jewish people or kill the Christians, right? And nobody wants to talk about the Christian executions that were going on in Syria just several weeks
Hmm.
ago. Where they were marching them out on the beach and cutting their throats and bleeding them out into the ocean. Nobody wants to talk
That
about
barely
that.
made the news. Even that
No,
that
but we
barely
but
even was mentioned.
but look at this house getting blown up by an F-16, and we should feel bad for those people. And it's like, you got to understand, guys, that one, this has been going on for thousands of years. This isn't new. Unfortunately, pretty much since Baldwin the Fourth, which was the last
Yeah.
guy running the crusade down there. Bring him back, right? Bring him back from the dead. Let's get some metal
Rest in
masks
peace.
and go. I'm all for it. It's just how these people live. And I work in the army still, on the civil affairs side, and the three easiest ways to collapse a society in order to get them to assimilate to whatever you want is lack of food, water, and access to electricity or energy, right? And when you're
Hmm.
knocking out everything else, you're going to watch the society collapse in real time, right? And they're going to fight with everything they got. But here's the thing: you're more worried about a country overseas that is thousands of miles away from a place you will never go to, but you're not worried about what's going on down the street from you when your child is being forced to adhere to Sharia law or respect XYZ, as a Christian nuclear family trying to exist in the United States because you're told you're Islamophobic or you're a racist or any of these other things when, like we said in the beginning of the podcast, that is literally the foundations of what this country was built on. Like even U.S. versus Trinity Church, which I discussed beforehand, like that defined the U.S. as a Christian nation built upon Christian values. Even
Yeah.
our founding fathers said this Constitution only exists for a Christian people because they have the morality to understand how this is supposed to be implemented in society, which is like interesting about your story too, because you said like, you were raised in Canada and then you went back to Egypt, but even you said that your morals didn't align with the Islamic religion. So, I mean, that kind of reinforces what we believe as Catholics is that morality is given to us by God, not a government, right?
Yes. 100, and most Muslims' morality. I'll give you a great example. So in 2013, the Muslim Brotherhood took over Egypt, and they wanted to enforce complete Sharia law.
Yes.
And the majority of Muslims in Egypt didn't want that
Hmm.
because they knew that if they had complete Sharia law, that they would be living in misery their whole lives. Like they were like, okay, maybe we can oppress the Christians or something,
Hmm.
or any other minorities,
And take their
but
stuff.
take their stuff. But now you're saying if I steal, I get my hand cut off, or if I start questioning, I start getting executed. We don't want that part of Sharia law.
Yeah,
So
not that one.
in our consciousness, we know what's real and what's not real. We
Hmm.
know what's from God and what's not from God. So even in Muslim countries, the only people who have really established Sharia law, like 100%, has been ISIS.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like, and even
exactly.
them, they had to make exceptions because even at that point, they had to ban the burqa in ISIS once because people were sneaking in and trying to bomb people in ISIS. It was a whole story in 2016. It was hilarious that ISIS in France banned the burqa like around the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and then
Yeah.
it's also like just how they operate in general. Like like I had to deal with them overseas, doing missions in and out of Syria,
Hmm.
and it's absolutely wild what they do. I mean, I watched 5-year-old kids on drone feeds like shoot each other over a bag of flour.
Yeah, it's terrible.
You know what I mean? And it's just like this is the result of this society existing for, whatever, over 1,000 years or whatever it is, right? Like
Hmm.
this is the result of how these people desire to live. And like I said, you have the freedom of religion. You're not free from religion. But is
Hmm.
this really how you want to live? Is this what the America that you want to live in the free Western world? And like I said, we are the beacon of freedom around the world. That's why everybody wants to come here. But if you are giving up everything that people have fought for in this country in order to establish those premises, then where do we go from here? Because you might as well just go into complete anarchy and give it up to be divided amongst the nations that fight for it. And,
Yes.
that is even described in the Bible, right? Nation upon nation. But do we really want that to happen? I would say no.
No, I agree 100%. And I think I think actually what happened recently with the whole Charlie Kirk thing
Hmm.
has awoken a lot of people. I shouldn't say a Charlie Kirk thing. He was assassinated, and we should address it that way.
Yeah.
And it really, like made people wake up and see what's going on in the country and be like, there is actually like not just a political divide, but a spiritual warfare that's happening.
Yes.
And I saw that with people who are actually celebrating his death.
Which is
And these
wild.
people who, which is, yeah,
That's
whatever
wild.
you have politically is that's insane in my mind. That someone dying you can celebrate, and these people who are celebrating his death are usually very left wing, and that ideology is aligned with Islamic ideology. And the people in the middle are people like us who are just saying, "Hey guys, let's think rationally here. Let's defend ourselves from ideologies like this. Let's have a country where it's sustainable and people can have the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech and expression." And people are saying that we are the insane ones, even though the
Yeah.
two people who are aligned with each other are literally like in sheer contrast with each other. So in my mind, it has to be a spiritual war.
It has to be, right? And because I think I wouldn't say a breaking point. That's a bad way to say it. Turning point, not to be, not to use the terminology of the organization he ran,
Yeah.
but it's at a point where, he had just was preaching about the gospel prior to it. He was assassinated. I had just landed in DC when that happened. Everything got shut down. It was absolutely insane.
Hmm.
But here's the thing is that our entire country was built on the premises of we can speak about our ideas and not be violent towards each other. And the second that he was assassinated from that, I sat there and went, everything that this country stood for right now is starting to collapse in real time because
Yeah.
that's what we want in this country. We want to be able to speak our ideas, right? And it's like, yeah, you want to know what? You do have the freedom to speak about racism or whatever else it is, or racial slurs. Yeah, we do have that ability. You don't have the freedom from consequences, though. Right. And I hate the
Hmm.
people that try to make the argument, oh, Charlie Kirk was a racist, everything else. Well, obviously, clearly, you've never watched any of his debates or anything else because that's not accurate.
If
You know,
he's a
when
racist, then I'm screwed, man. That's all I'm
Oh,
gonna
yeah,
say.
I know, right? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, let's not chat then. Because it's like, even when it's like, oh, well, he said he wanted to get rid of the Civil Rights Act and women
Hmm.
shouldn't vote. I'm like, you're taking that completely out of context, right? If you
Yeah.
actually listen to the entire debate, he explains how, yes, we want to make sure that you are not judged upon the color of your skin, right? And you
Hmm.
have access to everything else. But that was used to infuse more leftist liberal ideologies such as DEI, and then people took advantage of it in Title IX. And now we're dealing with the transgender movement in the United States, which is destroying our ability to have children, right?
Yeah.
And it's taking away from those fundamental family values. Because like, look, I have nothing against the LGBTQ community. You guys can do whatever you want as an American as long as you're over the age of 18, right?
Yes.
Stop messing with the kids, right? But let's be honest, 50 to 100 years from now, who are the only people that are going to exist from that generation? It's probably the people having kids,
Hmm.
right? And the people who are having kids probably more focused on monotheistic religion and cultural values that align with that, right? So you're free to eliminate yourself from society as an American. Go ahead, from the genetic standpoint, right? But you have to understand is that everyone says, "Oh, we're about a democracy." It's a democracy. Well, a democracy is 51%, and you're telling me that the 0.0001% of the population is dictating how the laws and everything are implemented in the United States. Well, that's not a democracy then, right? And we
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
no offense, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. So even more so, right, is that the majority of people in the United States, right, have some type of monotheistic Christian belief system that just want to have families take care of their kids, go to work, and just be left alone. I mean, that at the
Yeah.
most
Exactly.
generic sense of it, right? So that if that's the majority of people, then why are we allowing small groups of people with very dangerous ideologies to infiltrate everywhere on the premise of, well, they're a minority and have to have a voice? You can have a voice, you can voice your opinion, but that doesn't mean we should reframe our entire law structure and constitution and dissolve everything this country fought for and what the men and women in the US military have died for over 250 years for your one thing. That
Yeah.
makes zero sense, right? And it's just, Charlie Kirk was a martyr in my opinion, right?
Hmm.
He was a soldier for Christ in my opinion. Christ was also crucified just for words. He
Yeah.
died because of his words, right? And I'm hoping that this is a wake up call to Americans, and especially in our generation, right? Where we can't depend on our politicians to consistently make the right decisions. We have to demand accountability. And even if that means removing them from office, I don't care about D versus R, right? I care about that you have moral and ethical people elected into office from the lowest levels, whether that's school boards, city mayor, student council, whatever it is. Um, because if you don't, you're going to start seeing the permeation of these ideals that don't align with our constitutional, Christian foundations. And you're going to watch society crumble in real time, which is already happening. And I hope you are 100% wrong when you said that, we're going to start turning
I don't
into.
want to be right. I don't
I
want to
don't
be
want you
right.
to be right either. But I mean, we have to be honest, right? Is that if we keep progressing the way we are now, if we keep allowing the people that have run this country for 20 to 30 years keep making the decisions, then we deserve nothing but the worst of what's going to happen, which is already
Yeah.
happening. And I think voices like yours are so important in this conversation, in order to get these kids, the younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, to be engaged. It is your time. You have the
Mm.
responsibility to be a citizen or a resident, right? And I always say a resident is someone who uses the bathroom, takes their kids to soccer practice, complains about the government on the internet, and just eats and sleeps and charges their cell phone.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you could exist. You can do nothing. You could sit there and complain about the price of eggs all day, but that's not changing anything. Or you can be a citizen. And being a citizen requires your time, your treasure, and your sacred honor, as our founding fathers said, right? In order to sacrifice something for this country, right? And you are, as an American, I think it's an obligation for you to sacrifice some of those things, whether it's your time, money, and treasure, in order to ensure that this Constitution in this country survives itself. Because
Hmm.
if we don't take that responsibility, then we're just going to have the best of the worst as our elected officials, and we're going to watch our society slowly decline down that slippery slope.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking about when you were saying how we let minorities control everything?
Hmm.
Think about like the gay pride parades, for example.
Sure.
Since 2015, any two men or two women can get married anywhere in the United States.
Yep.
So what are they protesting for?
I don't know, because I mean I have gay friends, and most of them are most of them are fine. Like they just like, oh yeah, that's the group of our gay friends that make
Yeah,
us
no,
look
same.
stupid,
Like I have gay friends
right?
too, and they're like, I don't want anything to do with this. It's like what, but they're always like protesting for their rights, and I'm like, you do know
Well,
you can go get married. You can like no one's bothering you anymore.
I always tell people, I'm like, so what rights do you not have that are being oppressed? I'm confused. Are you asking for the right to take more of my tax dollars to fund your
It's
stuff?
the right not
I'm
to make
against
you
that.
gay. That's the right. It's the
Yeah.
right to not make you gay.
Yeah, like I don't
Yeah.
understand that argument. I'm like, dude, we live in the US. You understand that, right? Like tell me
Mhm.
what rights you don't have.
Yeah,
I mean, you can
exactly.
pretty much do whatever you want in this country, which is insane. Like try to go to any other country and pull that. It's never going to happen.
Mhm.
Ever. Like you will get I mean, you go to England and put out a bad X tweet and you're going straight to the station. And that's all over
Yeah,
the like TikTok
exactly.
and stuff right now. People are like, "Hey, you put out the tweet that your neighbor over there was that's a Canadian accent. That was really bad."
Yeah, I don't know where you're
But
going with that,
it's like,
but
"Oh,
yeah.
okay, I'll switch to Scottish. Like, oh, you put out a tweet over there. They offended your neighbor, so now we're going to arrest you and bring you down to the station until you apologize." It's like, what is going on?
Mhm.
What is going on? Yeah, can
Yeah.
you imagine if that happened in the United States? I mean, we had some of that during COVID, right? You saw the oppression of information and things by the government,
It
which I
was
think was a
nowhere near as bad though. Like
no was near as bad. But I mean, can you imagine if that actually happened here?
I think there'd be riots.
Yeah, yeah, riots, absolutely.
At
So, but
least.
also,
At least.
speaking of riots, how many riots were there because of the Charlie Kirk assassination?
Negative. There is
I didn't
none.
see any. I just saw people having vigils and prayers, but then you see all these other people, the illegal immigrants or all these other groups that claim to be oppressed, and they're burning down police stations, burning cop cars, getting pepper bombed in the face. I'm like, we are different. We are not the
Mhm.
same, right?
Yeah,
We are
exactly.
definitely not the same.
That right there shows you completely. Not only did nothing happen, no riots happen, they were celebrating this man who got assassinated. And then when something else similar happened to them, which, if anything, I don't want to say too much, I don't want to get canceled here, but if anything, the two people are not equal, the entire country's on fire.
Yeah, I mean, they built statues and like painted murals of like even like George Floyd and whatever else, and it's like, okay, they buried him in a golden casket. Like, okay, do whatever you want. Like, it's America,
Mm.
but like they
Why,
destroyed
why are
our
you
first.
burning down the Walmart? I don't.
I don't. Yeah, like you need the Walmart. When I was in Isla in Scotland, they're like, we really wish we had the Walmart. because at least I could go get some stuff. Every time something breaks here, I have to go back to Glasgow and go get all of my stuff, because it's like a 6 hour trip. It takes forever. I have only one car
Yeah.
out here. Like, Americans have no idea how good they have it that like, oh, I need to go to the store and get something in like 20 minutes and you can get it like, or like an Amazon drone like drops it off at your house. Like that
Yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
exist in like any other country but the United States. Like it's wild. Like, please, if you're an American, go travel. Go. I
Mhm.
even have people at where I work that are just like, I can't take how much Trump is a fascist. I'm moving to Germany or France. I'm like, do it. Go. Just go ahead. Like, let me know how that works out for you. Like, I think you watch too many Disney movies. Like, it's
Mhm.
not. There's not like these magical castles and elf fairies and fairy folk running around and everyone's living in peace and harmony. I mean, when I landed in Paris in June to do the D-Day jump, they were burning cop cars and throwing Molotov cocktails in the street, and I'm like, I've been here for 20 minutes and there's already civil unrest. I'm like,
It's
what
like
is
a
going on
regular
right now?
Tuesday in France. It's
Yeah, and
just
it's
a
like,
regular
hey,
day.
who's not the American? You look at the giant 200, 40-pound white guy walking through the airport, like, yeah, he's definitely an American because he's not Russian. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
I don't know what to tell you.
Oh
So,
my
so
goodness.
what are you doing now? How are you getting engaged in your local community? What all the podcasts and stuff you're going on? What are you doing now to spread awareness about your message?
I basically do so I do a few things. I have secret Bible studies that I have for people trying to convert from Islam to Christianity. I do a lot of stuff politically here in Canada. That's a lot of it focusing on abortion, actually,
That's
because
great.
Canada is in the Constitution of Canada that basically abortion is a human right, which is disgusting. However, they did a poll, and around 45% of Canadians don't think it should be. And this is
Yeah.
the thing. So a lot of people think all Canadians are liberal. The conservatives are huge in Canada, but the liberals just have a huge grip on the country. And it could have been the same thing in the US if Harris won, and I don't know what would have happened. But
Yeah.
they basically we're waiting for it to happen here in Canada, and it's going to happen because no one is happy here with the way the government's doing stuff. So a lot of things that I'm really focusing on is ending abortion, ending euthanasia, because euthanasia is a thing here, and
Yeah.
those things are just disgusting. And I don't even think you have to be a Christian to realize you're disgusting things that you cannot have in a society. A society based off of death cannot live.
Yeah,
Base
they
that
so
like
they want to
that's the
save the
main
kids in
principle.
like they want to save the kids in Gaza and they want to save all the children in these Middle Eastern countries, but then they want to wipe out the future of their population in their own countries through abortion.
Yeah.
I don't understand that argument at all.
It's their choice, guys. You know, I
It
have the
makes
choice
no
to murder
sense.
someone.
You're trying to save the kids in another country in a place you're never going to go to, but here you have no problem killing off, your entire
Mhm.
future population because you don't want to have kids. I, I
Exactly.
don't I don't understand that concept. We're just brain rotted with this ideology that having kids is bad. It's not. I can't wait to be a dad. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Oh, same. It'd
I
be
can't
awesome.
wait. It's going to be awesome. I mean, I bought 12 acres of land for a reason. Like, I'm trying to build my own farm,
Mhm.
society out here, right? It's just like, living off the land and everything else, but it's just like if we don't have people like you fighting for these things, even our closest neighbor, which should be the 51st state if it was up to me, um, you know,
I'm
then
all I'll say is this is how I describe Canada when I'm in the US. Canada is a state that doesn't want to admit it's a state. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
it's like
Like
Puerto
it's
Rico, you know?
exactly. It's like we should be, and if we were, it actually might be a little bit better for us. But we're not going to admit it. So whatever. I get to be in the U.S. for 6 months without a visa, and no one cares.
Yeah. No, you'll have to let me know if you ever get a visa and come down to Colorado. If you want to fly down, let me know. We'll have to meet up. I'll get you some talking events and stuff. I'd love to have you
Oh,
meet you some
awesome!
people out
Yeah.
here. It'd be great to have you down here,
Oh, it's
especially.
it's so easy as a Canadian crossing. They don't even look at me. Like I ran across the border. It's
That's a
like,
good thing. That's a
yeah.
good thing. Some other people are getting DHS. The Trump administration put out like a DHS video. It was like the Pokemon song. It was like
Hmm.
Pokemon got to catch them all, and he's like throwing like Pokeballs at all the illegal immigrants as they're throwing them into the car. I'm like, this is funny. Like
Yeah. Exactly.
whoever's in charge of social media at the White House is like, this guy is a millennial troll. Like he just watched Step Brothers like 8 times
Yeah.
in a row. It's like,
Literally.
you know, what would be funny. This would be funny. And to me, it's hysterical. Like I've met his entire family except Melania and the president himself personally. They are honestly great and amazing people. And I hate that people are so divided on a man they've never met. And the one
Yeah.
thing I always say, like, unless I like one-on-one interview on a podcast or like I shake your hand and meet you in person, like I don't judge you. And like as Catholics, that's our duty, right? We don't
We're
judge
supposed to
people.
do. Yeah.
That's what we're supposed to do, right? And I wish more Americans like you and I, and or even though you're Canadian, like we just are open to having honest, long form conversations. Because without these conversations, we can't possibly continue to exist as a society. Everything is propaganda. Everything is. I tell, but I wouldn't. None of the news stations are correct. They're all lying to you, right? And
Hmm.
that's why the interviews like this are so important to the continuance of our society and enforcing, nuclear family values, Christianity, Catholicism. A little biased, obviously, as are you.
Yeah.
It's just guys, I'm telling you, if you just follow the basics, everything's going to work out for you. But if you keep fighting against, the word of God, like you're just going to have your society collapse. I mean, look what he did to most of the tribes of Israel. It's in the first book, guys. It's in the Old Testament. The tribes were consistently getting wiped out because they didn't want to listen. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like we're like repeating history constantly. And I always joke is like what Noah died when he was like what 900 years old or something like that. I forget his
Hmm.
exact age, but I'm like, yeah, you know why God shortened our lifespan? Because we can't figure it out. If we can't figure it out in 900 years, he's like, all right, that's it. We're going to cut this down to 100 years or less. And if they don't, we're just going to keep cycling people out until they get it.
Oh my goodness. You want a great example of how I know the media is lying to us all the time?
Go.
Is this happened again when I was in California, like literally a week ago. When I was down there, everyone was talking like, "Hey, did you have a hard time at the border, like crossing in?"
Yeah.
And no Canadian has a hard time at the border. All you have to do to go into the US is literally show your passport, say, I'm going to do this. Be like, oh, okay. Thank you very much. No one cares, right?
Yeah.
When you go, because can't no one's it's Canadians, who cares? And but their idea of the media was that the border, they basically like gonna arrest me or something because I'm brown or because like I have like a middle name that's Arab. And then when I was at the border, I was lied to by the Canadian media that the border was like all guns and people were getting shot all the time. And then I saw the wall that was
What?
in like by San Diego and Tijuana. It's just a wall. There's a mall beside it. There's
Yeah.
like people are just chilling. People are relaxing. And I'm like, oh, so we're all just lying to each other. Like
Yeah. I
everyone's
think
just
there was
lying to everyone.
the only thing that I've relevant. I mean, even though like the highest levels of human trafficking and drugs are actually coming through Canada, not Mexico, but the only thing that really made the news was up near like Fort Drum, New York, when
Mhm.
I think there was some. They didn't want to admit it, but it was like some Arab terrorists that had like a bomb strapped to their car and they were trying to drive it through the station, but like it didn't go off, and then the car just like blew itself up and like landed, on the side of the road. And everyone's like, but this wasn't terrorism. It just happened to be that their passports got burned up and nobody knew what was
That
going
wasn't
on.
terrorist.
Just ignore that. Like nobody wants to talk about that. It's like, what are you talking about? Like you saw the CCTV footage. This
Yeah.
car went aerial when it hit the when it hit the car barricade and like blew up when it hit the ground and lit on fire. Yeah, and it's like, no, we don't have issues up here. What are you talking about? But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, man. Like even when I go to most other countries, like there's no issues. Like it's this total media bias, and everybody's lying to
Everyone
you. And
makes you think everyone hates each other, and then like you meet people in real life and no one cares. Like literally,
dude,
no one cares.
I've had more pleasant conversations with Democrats and independents than even some Republicans, right? Because people
Yeah.
are so lied to in the media about everything. Like I always tell people, sit down, grab a beer if that's your thing, and just talk with people, And if you're just one of those normal people, like we have, like you and I, we have to keep having these conversations. We have to keep people
Yeah.
engaged because American society is being run by a very small group of people. And if you want to be part of that group of people, go run for office, go do things. But if not, you shouldn't just judge people simply because you're told what to believe about them. You really need to get to know them and have conversations.
And they want you divided. They they
They
they
do because
win
it's
by
easier to
keeping us
control you.
divided.
It's easier
Exactly.
to control you. So, Ismail, we've had such an amazing conversation today. Do you have any closing points, or where can people follow you on social media? Where can people follow you, all the work that you're doing, out there in Canada?
So I just have my Instagram, my YouTube, and then people donate to the PayPal for like different missionary work that I do. So
Awesome.
and they're all Ish of Arabia. So ISHOFARABIA, Ish of Arabia. So yeah, and
Awesome.
if I have an email to Ish of Arabia Inquiries, and then if anyone wants to send something longer, so yeah.
Yeah, get this guy talking on your podcast. Invite him. Like I'm already inviting you down here. If you want to come down, to Colorado, during the midterm election season, I'd love to come have you as a guest
That'd be
speaker.
awesome. Yeah.
I'll even buy your plane ticket. I'll be nice. You can stay at my house. You can crash in Denver. Just I'd love to have you down here
That'd be
and
awesome, man.
actually talk to the people in Colorado what's going on in your experience. I think that's so important. So we'll definitely work on get you out here sometime between now and November. And make sure you guys follow his Instagram, all his other things, and I will see you next week. And hang out for a minute when I close out, and we'll we'll
Yeah.
we'll end it right here. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.